Tonight, breaking news, a deadly mass shooting at a high school. Authorities just outside of Detroit saying they received more than 100 calls from inside the school. Students rushing out of the building, running for their lives. Police say a 15-year-old sophomore opened fire with a semi-automatic handgun. At least 3 students killed and 8 other people hospitalized, including a teacher. The suspect now in custody, plus the new details just coming in. Also tonight, Moderna CEO saying COVID vaccines may be less effective against the Omicron variant. The COVID mutation now confirmed in at least 20 countries, with the World Health Organization warning anyone 60 and older to avoid travel. In the U.S., the nationwide hunt for the variant within our borders, the CDC now ramping up efforts across labs and major airports. This just in, CNN has suspended Chris Cuomo indefinitely after newly released text messages revealed how the anchor helped his brother's defense, including contact with other journalists, as the former New York governor faced growing allegations of sexual misconduct. Plus, the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, the first accuser, taking the stand, detailing years of alleged sexual abuse by Jeffrey Epstein that began when she was just 14 years old, testifying that Maxwell was often in the room or participated. Plus, Epstein's longtime pilot also taking the stand, what he said about the famous names and world leaders who flew with the sex predator. Senator Oz, the controversial TV doctor, now entering the closely watched Senate race in Pennsylvania, running as a conservative, but he's already facing backlash since he's a longtime resident of New Jersey. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with that breaking news and the deadly shooting at a high school in suburban Detroit. Police say a 15-year-old sophomore fired up to 20 shots with a semi-automatic pistol, killing at least 3 other students. The victims ranging in age from 14 to 17, 7 other students and a teacher hospitalized. Police and SWAT teams moving in with authorities saying the suspect surrendered within 5 minutes. More than 100 calls were made to 911 as the shooting spree unfolded. President Biden tonight saying his heart goes out to the families impacted and that he's receiving regular updates on the situation. So far, no word yet on a motive, and the suspect reportedly not cooperating with police. Let's get right to Megan Fitzgerald, who leads us off tonight.
Tonight, horror in the hallways of another American school.
It's a very tragic situation.
The shooting happening inside Oxford High School, just outside of Detroit. Authorities in a press conference saying the first 911 call coming in at 12:51 p.m. They received over 100 calls. A 15-year-old sophomore opening fire with a semi-automatic handgun, killing 3 students, injuring 8 others, including a teacher. Investigators say the suspect shooting some 20 rounds. An officer already on campus, quickly moving in.
Deputies responded and within 5 minutes had the suspect in custody. He did not cause any problems. He gave the weapon up.
Authorities say the suspect is not cooperating, and it's too soon to know the motive. Parents in this tight-knit community visibly shaken and holding their children close.
I'm just so emotional because you never think it's going to happen here. And the kids just are all a big part of this community, and I'm so scared for them.
Fear gripping this town as President Biden tries comforting those mourning.
As we learn the full details, my heart goes out to the families enduring the unimaginable grief of losing a loved one.
I think this is every parent's worst nightmare.
Now left grieving in the midst of the holiday season. Megan Fitzgerald, NBC News.
All right, we thank Megan for that. Now to the other major headline tonight, the race to learn more about the newly discovered COVID variant, as scientists now say it may have been spreading undetected for weeks. This comes as an FDA advisory panel narrowly voted to recommend a COVID treatment pill that could be a game changer in fighting the virus. NBC national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more details.
Tonight, we're one step closer to a pill for treating COVID. An FDA advisory panel narrowly voting to recommend authorization of Merck's antiviral pill.
This is an oral medication that can be administered in the comfort of the patient's home, can be given as a prescription and picked up in the pharmacies.
How does this drug stack up against the Omicron variant?
I wish we knew. We're looking at it very carefully.
While as the Omicron variant spreads, the World Health Organization is advising people 60 and older and those with comorbidities like heart disease and cancer to postpone travel. Meanwhile, the White House COVID response team says there are now at least 226 confirmed cases across 20 countries.
One thing has become clear over the last 20 months. We cannot predict the future, but we can be prepared for it.
The CDC is now expanding its surveillance to 4 of the busiest airports in the country: New York's JFK, Newark, Atlanta, and San Francisco, with increased testing for specific international arrivals. This illustration shows the Omicron variant compared to the Delta strain. Notice how many more mutations it has. It turns out it was on the move earlier than we thought. The first known cases reported in Botswana on November 11th. Officials in the Netherlands also say the strain was apparently already in the country at least a week earlier than previously believed. Still, U.S. officials say it could be 2 weeks before we have more solid information as Americans prepare for the holidays.
I would not change any plans, but that doesn't mean you should be cavalier about it.
Today, stocks tumbled again, the Dow dropping more than 650 points.
The recent rise in COVID-19 cases and the emergence of the Omicron variant pose downside risks to the employment and economic activity and increased uncertainty for inflation.
Concerns are growing about the effectiveness of therapies and vaccines against the variant. Regeneron now says its monoclonal antibody treatment may not work as well on Omicron as it does on other strains.
We've started with very potent antibodies, so we have to look at how much the hit is, but more importantly, we have to get ready for the next one.
And Moderna's CEO warned today he expects a material drop in existing vaccines protection against Omicron. While late today, Pfizer applied for the first emergency use authorization of COVID boosters for 16 and 17-year-olds. There's no timeline on when the FDA could act.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez joins us now. Gabe, we'll get to that Merck pill in a moment, but I want to ask you first about the Moderna CEO's comments to the Financial Times. It rattled the markets and really got a lot of Americans nervous.
It really spooked the financial markets today, Tom. He said that there would be a material drop in effectiveness when this, when this vaccine goes up against this variant. And this is something that I had heard actually yesterday when I spoke with the chief medical officer of Moderna. They're really waiting for this data in the next 2 weeks, but they fully expect that they may have to tweak this vaccine.
All right, we'll have to wait and see on that. Back to the Merck pill now. Not exactly a slam dunk for Merck.
Yeah, absolutely not. This was a very close vote. The advisory panel voted 13-10 to recommend that Merck pill for emergency use authorization. The next step is that this now goes to the full FDA in the coming days. And many of the panelists actually said that they only want to limit this use to high-risk patients and not pregnant women.
Yeah, that was one of the big headlines coming out of there. All right, Gabe, we thank you for that. With still so much unknown about the Omicron variant, Moderna CEO is warning that existing vaccines could be significantly less effective in fighting the virus, as we just discussed with Gabe. Dr. Kathleen Newsel joins us now. She's the director for the Center for Vaccine Development and Global Health at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and she helped develop the first COVID-19 clinical vaccine trial here in the U.S. So, Doctor, I want to get your take on Moderna's CEO and his comments to the Financial Times. Does it worry you?
You know, this new variant certainly worries me. I'm not quite as confident as he is that there will be detrimental effects on the vaccine. I think we need to be cautious. We don't need to panic. And as you've heard, systems are in place, and we are going to learn a lot more about how these vaccines perform against this variant within the next few weeks.
Explain to our viewers, if they do need to tweak the vaccines, whether it be Pfizer, Moderna, or J&J, how long would that process be?
Well, as people recall, these were historically fast vaccines. So it's possible that they could actually manufacture the vaccine within weeks, but there will need to be testing. There'll need to be release assays and potency assays and quality control. So you're still talking, even in a best case scenario, you're talking a couple months. We've seen this before with variants, with the Delta variant, with the original Alpha variant. We need to be prepared to take action in parallel. But as I said, by the time we may need a new vaccine, we will know a lot more.
Totally right. I have one last question, just bottom line here. If people are waiting to get their booster, if they're waiting to vaccinate their children, what should they do in this situation?
Absolutely don't wait. You know, getting a booster, getting your antibody higher. We are seeing with these other variants that the vaccines work, but it may take a little more antibody. So this is the exact right time to get a booster dose. It's before the holidays. It's before cold weather is coming. We have a new variant. We need to get vaccinated if we're not vaccinated and get booster doses now.
Dr. Nuzzo from the University of Maryland School of Medicine, we thank you for your time. All right, as we reported earlier, Omicron also impacting the markets, the Dow falling by more than 650 points. The drop also coming after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said the Fed could end its bond buying program even sooner. NBC senior business correspondent Stephanie Ruhle joins us now live to help get us a better grip on what's happening here. And Steph, I want to start with Powell, who again is the chairman of the Fed. He told the Senate today that the Omicron variant poses a risk to the economy. We heard some of that in Gabe's piece, but here's a little bit more.
Greater concerns about the virus could reduce people's willingness to work in person, which would slow progress in the labor market and intensify supply chain disruptions.
All right, Steph, so explain this to our viewers now. Those comments, along with the reporting on the Omicron, has clearly spooked the markets. Why?
It has. It's not the only thing that impacted markets today, but think back to last summer when the Delta variant emerged. You saw a slowdown in the economic recovery. Suddenly, people were going out to eat less. They were traveling less. They were more concerned about going back to work in person. If this new variant poses those same threats and we change our behavior, it, of course, could then slow down this economic recovery when we do need people to get back to work. I mean, the travel restrictions alone. Suddenly, people won't necessarily be going to all the places they had been going. Now, what's a little odd, though, is a little bit of a slowdown in the economy could potentially help the situation because things are very hot right now in terms of inflation. And that is actually what spooked the markets the most today. What Jay Powell said today was the clearest pivot when he talked about inflation. He said inflation is no longer transitory. We should stop using that word. Transitory meaning short term. That's a huge pivot. You know, the Fed and this administration for months were saying this is tied completely to COVID. It's only going to be short term. Yes, inflation is tied completely to COVID, but it's not going away, at least not in the near term. And what really got the markets anxious was Jay Powell talking about this taper. Right now, what you have seen for the last year and a half is interest rates set at zero, the lowest possible. That's where it is in a case of an emergency. And the Fed has been buying bonds. They've been being very, very accommodative to keep the markets afloat. Well, now that we're in this economic recovery and the markets are hot and the real estate market is hot, the Fed is saying, well, we can take our foot off the gas. We can leave the markets on their own. It could end up being a positive. If interest rates go up a little bit, 1%, 2%, I know people are going, oh, that's scary. It's not necessarily scary. The last time inflation was this high, rates were at 5%. If they were at 1 or 2%, that would be okay.
Steph, finally, let's just connect the dots here for our viewers because a lot of them are going into the holiday shopping season, spending a lot of money on gifts if they have that money. Should they be worried at all about the overall economy with this sell-off that just happened?
Listen, the stock market and the economy are two different things. We never recommend that people jump and play in the markets and be day traders. We are in a steady economic recovery. Just yesterday, I interviewed the Mattel CEO. He said consumer demand is strong. The Walmart CEO has said the same. But it's never a time to be frivolous with your money, especially when we're living in uncertain times. And that's exactly what COVID has brought us.
Stephanie Ruhle for us tonight live on Top Story. Steph, we always appreciate your guidance. We will have much more on what you need to know about the Omicron variant with Dr. Natalie Azar, including with your children in the next half hour. Okay, we're also following late-breaking news tonight. CNN suspending anchor Chris Cuomo indefinitely after newly released transcripts and text messages revealed that he lied about his role in defending his brother, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, against allegations of sexual misconduct. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson with those late details.
Tonight, CNN suspending Chris Cuomo indefinitely for the role he played in shaping former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's defense.
Here's what we know. South Africa reported seeing cases.
His primetime show Monday night made no mention of newly released text messages and interview transcripts by the New York Attorney General's office that show Chris Cuomo helped prepare his brother for a press conference, assisted in drafting public statements, even shared a lead on one of the women accusing then Governor Cuomo of inappropriate behavior. In his last public comments on the situation, the anchor said he refrained from making any inquiries about his brother.
I never made calls to the press about my brother's situation. I never influenced or attempted to control CNN's coverage of my family.
But text messages between Cuomo and the governor's top aide, Melissa DeRosa, tell a different story. DeRosa reaching out to Cuomo for information about an impending article from the New Yorker's Ronan Farrow. Did you get any more intel, DeRosa texted? Chris Cuomo responding, story not ready for tomorrow. Telling investigators he called a fellow journalist who works with Ronan a lot to get the information. Cuomo said he would seek information at the direction of DeRosa, telling investigators, when asked, I would reach out to sources, other journalists, to see if they had heard of anybody else coming out. The anchor attempted to downplay his role after his brother's resignation in August.
I said point blank, I can't be objective when it comes to my family. So I never reported on the scandal. And when it happened, I tried to be there for my brother. I'm not an advisor. I'm a brother. I wasn't in control of anything. I was there to listen and offer my take. I did urge my brother to resign when the time came. There are stories and critics saying all kinds of things about me, many unsupported. But know this, my position has never changed. I never misled anyone about the information I was delivering or not delivering on this program.
But some criticizing the decision not to cover the scandal as a double standard after the Cuomo brothers repeatedly appeared together on CNN during the pandemic, often in lighthearted interviews.
You know, this is the regular swab. This is what we're told disappeared in the governor's nose.
Chris Cuomo has been clear that, it's family first and journalism second. I do think that CNN needs to take a stand. And I think they need to be very clear with both Cuomo and their audiences and with their employees about what is considered acceptable professional behavior.
And tonight, CNN appearing to take a stand. Ann Thompson joins us now live on set. I know you physically now have a copy of that statement from CNN. What else are they saying?
CNN makes two things clear, Tom. First of all, is that they were not privy to these documents that were released and all the transcripts and the text messages between Melissa DeRosa and Chris Cuomo. And they also says, the network also says that these documents point to a greater level of involvement than they knew, and that's why they suspended Chris Cuomo.
And tonight, even before that CNN statement came out and news of the suspension came out, there was other breaking news on this coming from an accuser of Andrew Cuomo.
Absolutely. Charlotte Bennett, she was the second accuser, the young woman who says the governor asked her intimate questions about her sex life. She says that if CNN has any kind of morals, has any kind of backbone, it must fire Chris Cuomo because he tried to smear women in the same way his brother did.
All right, Ann Thompson with all that breaking news tonight, and we appreciate it. Next tonight, the trial has begun for the former Minnesota police officer charged with killing Daunte Wright. Body camera video capturing the moment the 20-year-old black man was fatally shot during a traffic stop last April, with the officer saying she meant to fire a taser. Ron Allen has more from Minnesota.
The defendant, please stand up.
Jury selection underway in the trial of former police officer Kimberly Potter, charged with manslaughter in the death of 20-year-old Daunte Wright, another fatal encounter that fueled a spring of protests demanding racial justice. The incident seen on police body camera video. Prosecutors say Potter and an officer she was training stopped Wright because of an air freshener hanging from a mirror, illegal in Minnesota, and expired license plates, and tried to arrest Wright after discovering an outstanding warrant for a gross misdemeanor weapons violation. Potter, with 26 years of police experience, is heard warning about firing a taser. But prosecutors say she fired a single lethal shot from her gun. What Potter's attorneys say was a mistake, an explanation Wright's family rejects.
Everybody who's been there for us, standing with us on one of the worst days of our life.
Is there anyone here who would believe the testimony of a police officer just because he or she is in law enforcement?
Potential jurors questioned about their views on police, race relations, and the unrest that erupted after Wright's death and during the trial of the officer convicted of killing George Floyd.
Juror number 7, you will be on this jury.
The judge saying it should take a week to seat 12 jurors after assurances they would rely only on the evidence during the trial to determine whether Potter is criminally responsible. Potter faces up to 15 years in prison if convicted of first-degree manslaughter. The judge has said the trial should be over by Christmas. One of Potter's attorneys said the former police officer does plan to testify in her own defense. Tom?
Ron Allen for us tonight. Ron, thank you. Next to the stunning testimony in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, the first accuser testifying about the alleged abuse by Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell. Epstein's personal pilot also taking the stand, listing the famous men who flew with the convicted sex offender, including 2 former presidents. Stephanie Gosk reports.
The first of Ghislaine Maxwell's 4 accusers, and the one who says she was just 14 when the abuse began, graphically described the first time Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused her in the pool house at his Palm Beach mansion, telling the court, "I was frozen in fear. I had never seen a penis before. I was terrified and felt gross." Testifying under the pseudonym Jane, she said Maxwell and Epstein first approached her at a summer camp for gifted artists, which prosecutors say was the beginning of years of abuse, including 10 trips to New York and New Mexico. Jane said Ghislaine Maxwell was often in the room and at times took part in the abuse. Maxwell pleaded not guilty to 6 sex trafficking counts spanning from 1994 to 2004. Her defense team told the jury Jane only spoke out because she wanted money from a lawsuit. Maxwell's attorney referred to her as a consummate actress. Earlier in the day, Jeffrey Epstein's private pilot told the court he remembered meeting Jane, especially her piercing blue eyes, but that she seemed mature to him. He also recalled a list of famous and powerful men who flew with Epstein on his private jet, including Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Donald Trump, and Kevin Spacey. The pilot testified that he never saw any sexual activity on the plane and that the cockpit door was normally closed.
Stephanie Goss joins us now from outside the courthouse. Stephanie, another eventful day there at this trial. You know, the defense was tough on the first accuser in the cross-examination. We got that sense in your story. What did they specifically target from her testimony?
So, Tom, they wanted to poke holes in her credibility, which is something that the defense often does in cross-examination. Specifically, they went after this notion that Ghislaine Maxwell was in the room repeatedly over the course of the abuse. And they asked Jane specifically how many times she was there, and Jane said she couldn't recall. They also asked her why, when she told siblings, her publicist, her boyfriend about the abuse, why she didn't also mention Ghislaine Maxwell. She only mentioned Epstein, and she said, "I don't know. The things they did to me were so despicable, I didn't want to talk about them." Tom?
Stephanie Goss for us outside that courthouse tonight. Stephanie, thank you. And tonight, new insight in the Theranos fraud case. Founder Elizabeth Holmes in the hot seat as prosecutors dig into her 11-year relationship with Chief Operating Officer Sunny Balwani. In shocking testimony this week, Holmes accused her former boyfriend of being controlling and abusive. NBC's Emily Aketa breaks down the latest.
What do you hope the jury is going to learn about you this week?
Elizabeth Holmes back on the stand today in her fraud trial, this time fielding questions from prosecutors who have tried painting the founder of Theranos as a con woman. The cross-examination of Holmes comes a day after she unveiled stunning allegations, tearfully telling the jury she was raped while a student at Stanford University, adding, quote, "I was questioning how I was going to process that experience, and I decided that I was going to build a life by building this company." But the abuse continued, according to the 37-year-old, revealing she wasn't always the confident businesswoman seen in the media.
First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
Holmes says she was in an abusive relationship with Theranos Chief Operating Officer Sunny Balwani, who is also charged with fraud. She testified Monday he dictated her behavior, from her diet to tone of voice, adding Balwani forced her to have sex with him. Balwani's denied allegations of abuse, and today prosecutors underscored messages of support he sent Holmes. One reading, "I love you, worship you, be yourself." How could the allegations of abuse impact the course of this case and jurors' opinion?
Bringing up the alleged abuse definitely humanizes her. We have not seen an Elizabeth Holmes like this that breaks down, that cries, that is emotional. But at the end of the day, these abuse allegations really have nothing to do with what she's being charged with.
The 37-year-old, who says she's innocent, faces 11 counts of fraud, accused of lying to patients, doctors, and investors about the capabilities of her blood testing company, once valued at $9 billion.
I'm the founder and CEO of this company. Anything that happens in this company is my responsibility at the end of the day, and I hold myself responsible for that.
That's Holmes in 2016. But this week, the defense distancing the dissolved company's founder from failed lab operations. When asked who was responsible for operational management of the lab, she answered Sunny Balwani, the former golden girl of Silicon Valley, the latest in a string of defendants to take the stand in high-profile cases.
Elizabeth Holmes has a long history of charming, knowledgeable, influential people. So it stands to reason that her attorneys think she can also charm 12 jurors sitting in front of her.
Emily Aketa joins us now live from Los Angeles. And Emily, it's a good time to remind our viewers what's at stake for Holmes in this trial.
Good evening, Tom. Holmes' trial is expected to continue through mid-December. If convicted, she could face up to 20 years in prison plus fines. Co-defendant Balwani will face a trial of his own in January. Tom?
On trial as well. All right, Emily, thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, the neighborhood Inferno. Take a look at this new video showing flames completely engulfing a home. How a pregnant woman helped save a man who was asleep inside. All right, back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the investigation underway after a multi-home fire in Utah. Cell phone video shows at least one home in West Jordan engulfed in flames. A pregnant woman credited for saving the homeowner after she ran up to the burning home and banged on the door until he woke up. 2 police officers also rescuing a woman and her dog from another home after flames spread throughout the neighborhood. No one was injured. And former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is now cooperating with the January 6th investigation. The chair of the House committee investigating the Capitol riot confirmed Meadows has handed over requested documents and will appear before a deposition. The committee was considering moving forward with a contempt of Congress charge against Meadows after he failed to show up for questioning earlier this month. And Adele is saying hello to Las Vegas. That was a horrible impersonation. The singer announcing a residency at Caesars that will run from January to April. She'll perform 2 shows a week with pre-sale beginning on December 7th. I'm being told it's kind of a complicated process. It comes on the heels of her 4th studio album, 30, which debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts this week and is already the top-selling album of 2021 in the U.S. All right, now we turn back to the ongoing hunt for the Omicron. Scientists nationwide on the lookout for that variant, with one California university lab sequencing swabs and sewage, checking positive COVID tests and wastewater to catch possible outbreaks early. Erin McLaughlin takes us inside the effort.
Tonight, the CDC and scientists at nearly 70 state and local health labs are on the hunt for Omicron, sequencing 40 to 80,000 specimens each week.
Given what we've seen in Southern Africa and certainly in Europe, we do expect that it is here.
Like all viruses, COVID mutates. That's normal. But what has experts concerned is the high number of mutations in the Omicron variant, which attaches to human cells, making it more transmissible to others. We were invited inside the labs at UC San Diego, where scientists are sequencing positive COVID tests to check for the mutated virus.
We get a lot of Delta right now. It's pretty much everything that we have in the lab coming through is Delta.
In the lab, scientists take a COVID positive sample and look for what's known as an S dropout, meaning the virus's spike protein is so mutated that it can't be detected. That tells them they could be dealing with a variant such as Omicron.
How likely is it that you're going to find it?
Oh, we'll find it eventually. It's just a matter of how soon.
Here, the virus hunting starts at the sewer. For months, this team has been collecting and sequencing sewage samples from UC San Diego and elementary schools across the city. It's a way of detecting asymptomatic infection early.
By sequencing the wastewater and understanding what particular variants are in our community, it allows us to understand whether there's a variant of concern that has arrived.
Although there are no signs of Omicron so far, scientists say it's only a matter of time. Tonight here in San Diego at this facility, scientists say they're poised to be among the first to find it. Tom?
All right, we thank Aaron for that report. As scientists rush to map the spread of the Omicron variant, I want to bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar to discuss some of the best practices right now. And Dr. Azar, if we can focus on children right now. So, kids under 5, they haven't gotten the vaccine yet. Does this mean now with the Omicron variant possibly spreading in the U.S., we should sort of dial back any activities?
That is my initial instinct. And Tom, it's hard, I think, for people to think that they need to start to go backwards again. But look, we are heading into the winter months. I'm sorry if you have a little kid out there for birthday parties, but I think you really need to be careful about mixing households where you really don't know the vaccination status of a lot of the people. I think that if you have a group of families who you've been congregating with and you know the vaccination status, and especially if you're vaccinating all eligible people in the child's bubble, I think you can still safely get together. And, it would be remiss of me not to make a plug at this point, too, for the flu shot for kids. We know that is life-saving. We're going to see more flu this year. I'm convinced of it. We saw more RSV. So all those things like masking and hand washing, those are good lessons for kids to learn now because it will prevent the spread of those other respiratory viruses.
It's a great point because a lot of times the kids in certain schools are getting tested a lot. So if your kids are getting tested and they're okay, you don't necessarily have to go back to what you were doing at the peak of this pandemic.
I agree.
Speaking about winter, though, you did bring it up.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it up. You did. I do want to ask you, do we think we're going to have another COVID winter?
I think we probably will. The thing is that we thought for some time that we would see sort of the seasonal variation, that COVID would go away in the summer. Well, it didn't. That's when we had Delta, right? So we're seeing these surges kind of pop up in different parts of the country. But suffice it to say, the virus definitely likes when you go inside. It likes that cool, sort of that non-humid air. And we are worried that the Omicron is, in fact, a little bit more transmissible than Delta. I think we are going to see it as people are, relaxing their vigilance about masking and things like that.
We are approaching that 2-year anniversary, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are they have the COVID fatigue. They're done with the masks. They're done with all the rules and regulations.
Right.
What do you tell people as a healthcare professional right now? Yeah. We have this new variant that, again, it's possibly spreading in the U.S. Seems like it could be incredibly serious. What do you tell those people?
I say basically we have this unprecedented once-in-a-century pandemic, and our behaviors really need to match the tenacity and the diligence of the virus, right? It is so stealthy. It has proven to be so, and that it's not going anywhere. So if that means that we need to be a little bit more steadfast and resilient and stubborn about certain things like mask wearing and hand washing, so be it. You'd rather have a mask on your face, I guarantee that, than wearing an oxygen mask in the hospital.
All right, Dr. Natalie Azar for us tonight. Dr. Azar, thank you. We turn to politics now, and the new celebrity candidate throwing his hat in the ring for a Senate race in the key swing state of Pennsylvania. Maura Barrett has that story.
Pennsylvania needs a conservative who will put America first.
Echoing a familiar phrase from former President Trump, celebrity heart surgeon Dr. Mehmet Oz announced his candidacy for Pennsylvania's open U.S. Senate seat.
To advocate for you.
In a highly produced video filled with clips from his TV career, Oz declaring he's running as a Republican, looking to push aside the crowded field with his celebrity profile. The previous conservative frontrunner withdrew last week after accusations he brutally assaulted his wife and children. In today's announcement, Oz hits notes popular with the Republican base, starting with the pandemic.
But COVID has shown us that our system is broken. Washington got it wrong. They took away our freedom without making us safer and tried to kill our spirit.
And he hints at pro-life rhetoric.
As a heart surgeon, I know how precious life is.
Oz rocketed to stardom as a regular on the Oprah Winfrey Show, but more recently seen on outlets like Fox News, often backing medical treatments like hydroxychloroquine that have since proven to be misleading or false.
If we have ideas of compounds, this being an example, but there are others being developed, that could either shorten the duration of the illness, make you less contagious, or prevent you from getting it, that changes the entire equation.
I might have someone talking about prayer.
The criticism to run in the key battleground state already coming quickly, as Oz has lived in the state next door for the past 2 decades. In fact, Oz only registered to vote in Pennsylvania earlier this year, using his in-laws' address to qualify. Democratic New Jersey Congressman Pascrell putting out a snarky tweet reading in part, "I'm sure this fully genuine candidacy will capture the hearts of Pennsylvanians." The swing state race seen as consequential as Republicans seek to regain control of the Senate. Pennsylvania Democrats hoping Oz's entry is a sign of Republicans in disarray. But the memory of President Biden's incredibly close win in the state isn't far behind them. Maura Barrett, NBC News.
Okay, we think more for that. Now to top stories, Global Watch. The wife of Mexican drug lord El Chapo has been sentenced to 3 years in a U.S. prison. Emma Coronel pleaded guilty to federal drug trafficking and money laundering charges in June. She is admitted to helping her husband, Joaquin Guzman, smuggle drugs into the U.S. and escape a Mexican prison back in 2014. Guzman was sentenced to life in prison in 2019. And violent clashes breaking out during protests in Sudan. Authorities firing tear gas to disperse tens of thousands of pro-democracy protesters in the country's capital. The massive group was marching towards the presidential palace. It's the latest show of opposition to the country's military rule following last month's coup. And Greece is making COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for its citizens over 60. Starting in January, fines of €100, about $115, will be given to those who refuse. The money will go towards the country's health system, which is struggling with a surge of COVID-19 hospitalizations. Data shows more than 520,000 Greeks over 60 have yet to get their shots. All right, coming up, the high honor for a global icon. Josephine Baker enshrined in France's Pantheon, the special tribute and how it's making history decades after her death. We'll be right back. All right, tonight, American legend and global icon Josephine Baker receiving one of France's highest honors. Baker, now the first black woman with a symbolic casket honored in Paris's Pantheon. Kelly Kobiea has more.
Tonight, a hero's tribute in Paris. Josephine Baker, artist, activist, and spy, enshrined in France's Pantheon, taking her place in history alongside French legends like writer Victor Hugo and scientist Marie Curie. She was the world's first black superstar, edgy, sexy, and hugely talented. Josephine Baker, born and raised in Missouri, became a household name in the 20s, a dancer, singer, and civil rights activist who spent her life breaking down barriers of exclusion, using her talent to make statements like this risque and controversial dance in a skirt made of bananas. Baker's public life made her a wildly popular star. Her private life, much of it spent at this remote French castle, made her a hero. It was her refuge and her family home. Akio Bouillon is Baker's eldest adopted son and grew up here.
We are arriving in my room.
This was your room?
Yes.
Did she dance in this?
That's it. It was a show.
Now a museum showcasing Baker's elaborate costumes, including a replica of that banana skirt. Traces of her extravagant lifestyle are still intact.
This is the famous bathroom.
Yes.
So dramatic.
She was very proud of his military medals.
And her most prized possessions of all. France's highest military medals, the Legion of Honor and Medal of the Resistance, were awarded for her secret work fighting the Nazis in World War II.
Was she a spy?
She was.
Hiding members of the resistance and fleeing Jewish families in her vast castle.
She was very brave.
For her, no. Everything she has done in Second World War, for her, was normal. She was giving back to this country, to France.
Josephine grew up poor in St. Louis, Missouri, leaving home to perform at 14, finding international fame in her 20s. But in the U.S., she said she faced hostility and racism. At New York's Stork Club in 1951, ignored for an hour. American actress Grace Kelly saw it all and walked out in solidarity. The future Princess of Monaco and the Queen of the French Cabaret becoming lifelong friends. Prince Albert, Grace Kelly's son, remembers a kind woman.
Every time I met Josephine Baker, even though I was young, she really, her generosity of spirit and of heart really always touched me. And I think that's what brought them together.
Baker adopted Akio and 11 other children from different countries, races, and religions, calling the family her Rainbow Tribe.
I have a dream that one day...
She was passionate in her fight against racism, too, sharing the stage with Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington in 1963. the only woman to address the crowd. But by the late 1960s, Baker was broke, the castle auctioned off, her rainbow tribe homeless. Old friend Grace Kelly, now Princess of Monaco, helped Baker sing her way back into stardom. A remarkable comeback in her 60s, selling out New York's Carnegie Hall, getting a standing ovation in Paris. But just days after her last performance, Baker had a stroke and never recovered. Thousands in France lined the streets for her funeral, buried with full military honors. The cemetery in Monaco is where Josephine Baker wanted to be buried, and her family says this is where she'll stay. Today, this extraordinary woman making history again.
Kelly joins us now from London. And Kelly, you know, we understand on that last point there, her remains will stay in Monaco, but she'll sort of have this symbolic burial as well in the Pantheon.
That's right. Her family wanted her to remain in Monaco. It's where she spent her last years. It's where she wanted to be buried. So the casket that was enshrined in the Pantheon today is actually contains soil from her hometown of St. Louis, from Paris, from the south of France where her castle was, and from Monaco. And of course, her plaque will be, her name will be displayed among all of those other French greats, some 80 French heroes inside the Pantheon. But, you know, France, she considered her true adopted home. Emmanuel Macron tonight said that she was more French than anyone, and part of the reason for that was because she had a very difficult childhood growing up in racially segregated St. Louis. It left a really deep impact on her. And when she got to Paris at the age of 19, she found just a completely different world. She was accepted there. She found none of that racial hatred. So while she never forgot the United States, her true love, her true country was really France. Tom?
Kelly Kobiea for us tonight. Kelly, a wonderful story. Thank you. When we come back, a spectacular Christmas surprise. The grandmother waiting decades to see the Rockettes again back at Radio City, but her granddaughter had one more trick up her sleeve. The moment you won't want to miss. Next. All right, finally tonight, a New York City Christmas dream come true. A granddaughter surprising her grandmother with a trip to New York to see her favorite show. Of course, the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. That moment going viral. Growing up, Shelby Heffling had always heard stories about her grandma, who she calls Nanny, and her time growing up in New York.
She was born in New York, and she told me all these wonderful stories about going out with her friends. And when she was younger, she went to the Rockettes show.
That 1930s visit to Radio City, a cherished memory.
Every year on Thanksgiving, when the Rockettes come out for the Macy's Day Parade, she gets so excited to see the Rockettes.
They are so perfect, you know, really.
The first time you saw them, you were 12?
I was 12 years old. I went for my birthday.
But this year, Shelby decided to make a new memory with her nanny, a surprise trip to New York City to see her favorite show.
And I got us tickets to the Rockettes at 5 p.m.
Oh, my God! How wonderful! Did you really? Oh, girl, I can't believe it.
On the drive up to the city, the memories flooded back.
Give my regards to old Broadway and tell them I'll be there somehow.
And then walking into Radio City, the flashbacks.
I could remember the dome and the lights and the stars and the beautiful big curtains and the stage. And it was just so very exciting, really.
What was your favorite part of the show this time around?
But I love the Wooden Soldiers best of all.
And after the show, another exciting surprise, meeting a few of the current Rockettes.
You'll never believe it, really. I was 12 years old. Oh, my goodness. And I will be 97 in June.
So, how did it compare to when she was 12?
I think it was every bit as wonderful the first time I saw it as it was the other night.
The whole trip, a dream come true.
I can't believe this whole day. It's almost too much.
Nanny and Shelby ending that night with a bike ride through Midtown Manhattan.
Everything we did in New York was just so special. It was really lovely.
Anywhere it's up to you, New York, New York.
A wonderful story and a wonderful reminder of why New York City is so special. Thanks so much for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.